Hello and welcome. I'm Professor Lukas, and today we'll be talking about generating and developing ideas. This information is adapted from Chapter 2, the writing process, in my textbook, College Composition and Reading, Information and Strategies. The first topic that we will be discussing is ways of getting ideas in the first place, and then we'll talk about developing those ideas once you've generated them. Generating ideas is an important part of the writing process. If you can find an idea you care about or are interested in, the entire process will go more smoothly. There are some general sources you can use to help you generate ideas for writing, the first of which is handouts and class notes. Of course, the assignment directions are always a valuable resource, but in particular, if the topic is related to the readings, assignments, or discussions the class has been doing, reviewing the related materials can help give you ideas or provide support for them. There are many other places you can get ideas as well. You can look on the internet, especially if a broad topic has been assigned, to see what arguments and information are out there and what other people have to say about the topic, which can help spark your own ideas on the topic, whether that's agreeing with what people have said or disagreeing. Either way, your engagement with the topic will help make the entire writing process both easier and more effective. Another method that takes advantage of how ideas can come up in reaction to other ideas is discussing the topic with others, which allows more direct response and is often much more effective than simply reading other people's thoughts on the internet. Discussing the topic among friends or in a study group can be fun and interesting and lead to excellent, well-developed ideas for writing as you develop your opinions. Another inspirational source can be your own interests. If you can think of a way that the assignment can intersect with something that you're already interested in or passionate about, it'll be helpful and will allow you to more easily write a fully developed essay or other type of writing. Taking a break is also a counterintuitive method that can actually be quite helpful. Once you've been working on getting a topic or thinking about it, it can be helpful to simply do something else for a while and let your mind continue to turn it over subconsciously. Activities such as washing the dishes, walking the dog, or folding laundry, where you're not deeply involved in complex thought, are ideal for letting the idea stew in the back of your mind. Once you have an idea, then you're ready to develop it. Next, we'll look at a few ways to develop your ideas through brainstorming. Brainstorming is technically a problem-solving method, although in this case, the problem is, what will I write about? Brainstorming is a creative thinking technique for coming up with ideas and solving problems. Ideas are the most valuable resource in any communication, which makes brainstorming for writing a crucial part of the process. In general, brainstorming consists of coming up with as many ideas as possible, so that in a later stage, the best ones can be selected, and patterns in the types of ideas generated can be identified. It can also be used to develop ideas further once you have an initial topic chosen. When hearing the word brainstorm, many people think of making lists of ideas. However, there are many ways to brainstorm, and listing is only one. Let's take a look at some different forms that brainstorming and idea development can take. Free writing can be an excellent method for developing ideas on a topic. Students who take my face-to-face course spend the beginning of every class doing a free write on the topic we'll be concentrating on, and they often comment at the end of the semester how much of a difference it has made in getting their ideas onto paper. In addition, often the question they're writing in response to is something they have never asked themselves or been asked, even if it is something like, what do they know about the topic? And yet, after 5 or 10 minutes, they've written a page on the topic and have many more clear opinions and ideas. Simply sitting down and writing freely without judgment on a topic or question can be a powerful way of generating a lot of ideas to work with. Related to free writing is looping, which is simply doing a free write for several minutes on a question or topic, and then reading it over to discover the heart of your ideas. Look for the most interesting or effective part and start a new free write with that thought or sentence as the new starting point. If you do that 3 or 4 times, you will end up with a thoroughly developed idea, as well as a lot of material that you can mine for support within the essay itself. Therefore, looping is an excellent way to go as well. In addition, you can try listing, which is simply sitting down and writing everything that comes to mind when you think about your topic or your question without judging any of it. The point is to get as many ideas out on the paper as you possibly can. The more ideas you have to work with, the better your results will be. This is a very simple and straightforward method, and one that many think of when they hear the word brainstorming. Asking questions is a great way to develop ideas once you have a rough idea of what it is you want to start with. You can ask the journalists questions of who, what, where, when, why, and how, or ask other questions of yourself, some of which are suggested in the textbook. For instance, questions about how things are defined, compared, or described, what it's related to, what it's associated with, what's an example of it, and more are given on page 39 of the textbook, which you can use as springboards for developing your own ideas. Another method that works very well if you're a more visual type of a person is mind mapping, which is sometimes known as bubbling or clustering, but simply involves writing down your topic or question in the middle of the page with a circle around it. Then, as you generate ideas, arguments, reasons, or potential support, you add them in new circles with lines linking them to the topic that sparked them. Similar ideas will be grouped together, and mind maps can use words or images. There are several advantages to this type of idea generation technique. One is its flexibility. You don't have to think of all the associated ideas at once. If you discover or think of a new idea for a previous topic, you can simply draw a new line for it. You can also use different colors, shapes, or icons to create meaning, as we will see on the next slide. Another advantage is that it's visually engaging. It's a lot more interesting to look at than a plain list, which makes it less boring to work on. One of the biggest advantages of mind mapping, in my opinion, is that once you're done, much of the organization is done for you. You can follow the lines between your bubbles to see which ideas are major or minor and how they fit together, as well as seeing which ideas have extensive or skimpy support, therefore making it easy to evaluate. You can see which ideas connect and which don't, making the relationships between the ideas clear. Now that you have a general understanding, let's take a look at a few examples. To create a mind map, usually you start with a circle in the middle with your topic, question, or thesis. Here we have a mind map that is set up directly as a plan for an essay and is labeled Essay Plan in the center. There is a link to this image file in the video assignment directions if you would like to view the essay plan mind map more closely or save it for reference. In the actual mind map, you would put the topic, argument, or thesis here. You can see there are different colors and shapes at play to distinguish the different types of connecting ideas as well. Ovals for the introduction and conclusion, a rectangle with rounded edges for references, and hexagons for the various paragraphs. The red introduction includes a thesis statement and a brief overview. You could also have an example or story or anything else you think of during brainstorming to help introduce your reader to your argument and topic. The blue sections for paragraphs each include the topic sentence and the supporting evidence, and the conclusion also gives space for the associated ideas. The references are sectioned into spots for the different types of sources you might want to consult, although this section could be heavily modified to be just a list of your ideas about where to look, organizations, websites, search terms you might try, and so on. While this mind map shows the skeleton of how you might plan out an essay, let's look at a somewhat different example that has the information filled in. You can see here that, as with all mind maps, the core idea is in the center, in this case, in a green circle. In this case, the person has already decided on their thesis, which is that the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally is part of the identity of Sturgis and the surrounding area. This mind map uses color in a different way, with a different color for each new subtopic level. Green for the main idea or thesis, blue for the overall topics, and orange for the support within those overall topics. The writer branched out to the blue boxes for paragraphs with specific reasons: the length of time it's been held, economic impact, world perception, and impact on growth. Each of these then has brainstormed examples or other supporting ideas in the orange boxes, showing that they're at a lower level. This can be an extremely useful technique. Think of reasons or arguments, not just topics, to put in the cluster, as well as support for those ideas. This can easily be translated into an essay, which would have 4 major sections, 1 for each of the blue box reasons, and it would have 10 paragraphs, plus the introduction and conclusion, 1 paragraph for each of the orange supports. This is also an illustration of how to expand the 5-paragraph essay as discussed in Chapter 1 of the textbook. Not only are there 4 major reasons or supports rather than 3, but each one is broken down into multiple subtopic paragraphs with distinct support. Let's take a look at a more artistic mind map as our final example of this creative and useful brainstorming and organizational technique. Here is an example of a more artistic mind map, with pictures drawn as well as words, but you can see that the central idea is about doing something in response to global warming and is supported in different ways, with things you can do while traveling, how to use less, things you can do at home, buying local food, and so on. Each of these larger topics has specific ideas and suggestions that can be used in the corresponding paragraph or section of subtopic paragraphs. You might want to take a moment to pause the video lecture and view the cluster in detail, seeing how it's arranged and how easy it would be to turn this into an essay. As you can see, there are lots of places to get ideas and lots of techniques for developing them. You can generate ideas from handouts or notes, from the internet or other reading, by discussing the topic with others, looking for connections with your personal interests, or just taking a break and letting your mind work in the background. You can also develop ideas once you have them in a variety of ways, including free writing or looping, asking questions, listing, or making mind maps. I invite you to try mind mapping or another technique out in the upcoming essay assignment. However, for now, we're ready to move on to the next topic in the next video: thesis statement.